They take. They take what you offer. Your love, your patience, your understanding. And yet, somehow, it's never enough. You start to believe the problem must be you. That if you were better, quieter, more patient, more forgiving, maybe then they would finally stay. But what if I told you it was never about you? What if their cold distance, their pulling away, their refusal to meet you halfway wasn't a reflection of your worth, but of their wound? Avoidants don't just withhold love. They steal it, like a kleptomaniac in a store who slips things into their pocket, not because they need them, but because compulsion drives them. The avoidant steals intimacy, then hides it away, and you're left standing there, empty-handed, wondering why love feels like theft. This isn't your fault. This isn't your failure. This is the story of them. And today, we unravel it. The pattern of taking without giving. Avoidants live in a cycle that feels eerily familiar to those who've known a kleptomaniac. A kleptomaniac doesn't steal because the item has value. They steal because the act itself relieves something inside them. A tension, an anxiety, a fear. Avoidants treat intimacy the same way. They step into your love, take what feels soothing for a moment, then quickly pull away. Not because you did something wrong, not because you failed, but because closeness itself terrifies them. It's as if every tender moment lights up alarms inside their nervous system. Every "I love you," every "I'm here for you," feels less like comfort and more like a threat. So they take just enough to survive and then run. And here's where the damage begins. Because you, the giver, the one who pours out love so freely, are left with the illusion that you simply weren't enough. That maybe if you gave more, they would stop running. That maybe if you sacrificed more, they would finally stay. But no matter how much you give, it disappears into the void. Because the problem isn't the gift. The problem isn't the giver. The problem is their inability to receive. Think about it. A kleptomaniac doesn't stop stealing because the store becomes more generous. They don't heal because someone says, "Take what you need, it's free." The act isn't about the item. It's about the wound inside. And so it is with avoidance. You could give them oceans of love, but if their heart is wired to fear drowning, they will sip from your cup and still feel overwhelmed. This is why you always end up drained. Not because your love is lacking, but because their fear is endless. And yet, they leave you with the story that you are the problem. You start to question yourself. Am I too needy? Am I asking for too much? Am I suffocating them? But what if the truth is, you were asking for the bare minimum? What if your needs weren't excessive, but human? What if love isn't meant to feel like walking on eggshells around someone else's fear? This is the hidden damage of avoidance, not just in the distance they create, but in the way they convince you to carry the weight of their wound. You become the one apologizing. You become the one shrinking. You become the one who feels guilty for simply wanting connection, and that guilt becomes its own prison. But hear this. Their avoidance is not your fault. Their distance is not a reflection of your worth. Their fear of intimacy is not your responsibility to heal. Just as a kleptomaniac must face the roots of their compulsion, an avoidant must face the roots of their fear. You cannot do that for them. You cannot heal the wound they deny exists. You cannot love them so perfectly that fear dissolves on its own. You cannot keep carrying what was never yours to hold. And yet, the cycle continues. Because love, at its purest, always wants to give. You want to believe in them. You want to believe that if you just hold on long enough, they will change. You want to believe that your love can be the exception. But exceptions don't heal patterns, and patterns don't break because of how much you care. This is why you must begin to see the cycle for what it is. It is not romance. It is not love. It is not connection. It is theft. Theft of your time. Theft of your energy. Theft of your joy. Theft of your belief. That love can feel safe. And until you name it, you will keep bleeding from invisible wounds. But the moment you call it what it is, avoidance, not intimacy, fear, not rejection, they're wound, not your worth. You begin to take your power back. Because the first step in breaking free is seeing clearly. It was never you. It was always them. The illusion of control, why you keep blaming yourself. The most dangerous part of loving an avoidant isn't just their distance. It's the way they train you to believe you're the problem. At first, it's subtle. They sigh when you ask for closeness. They retreat when you express a need. They tell you things like, "You're too much. Why can't you just relax? Why do we always have to talk about feelings?" And you, with your open heart, with your willingness to connect, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. So you shrink. You quiet down. You hold back. You start walking on eggshells inside your own relationship. This is the illusion of control. If you just manage yourself better, if you just stop asking, if you just give them more space, then maybe, finally, things will work. But here's the truth. The illusion of control is the trap that keeps you stuck. Because no matter how much you adjust, their wound doesn't change. Their fear doesn't dissolve. Their avoidance doesn't soften. You cannot negotiate with fear. You cannot bargain with trauma. You cannot trade your silence for their love. But you keep trying. Because somewhere deep down, you've learned that if someone leaves, it must mean you weren't enough. So you carry their burden. You tell yourself stories like, "If I were calmer, they'd stay. If I were prettier, they'd want me. If I were smarter, they'd finally see my value." And each story cuts you down.
Just a little more.
This is how avoidance damages you. Not just in what they don't give, but in what they convince you to believe. You stop seeing them clearly. And instead, you see yourself as broken. It's the same way kleptomania confuses the store owner. The shelves are stocked. The goods are in plain sight. Nothing is missing in supply. But still, the thief takes. And the owner wonders, did I not provide enough? Was the display unappealing? Did I fail to meet the need? The truth? The shelves were full. The goods were fine. The problem was never the store. The problem was the compulsion. And the same is true with you. You are stocked with love. You are abundant in care. You are offering all the things a healthy heart would treasure. But they take, not because you're lacking, but because their fear demands it. And they run, not because you're too much, but because your closeness feels like a fire alarm in their nervous system. So here you are, believing you can control it, believing that if you dim yourself enough, they will stop running. But every time you dim, you lose a piece of yourself. And what's left? A version of you that is smaller, quieter, emptier, all to preserve a love that was never safe to begin with. Here's the devastating part. The illusion works. You convince yourself that shrinking is love. You convince yourself that waiting is loyalty. You convince yourself that carrying their silence is the cost of intimacy. But none of that is true. Love does not ask you to erase yourself. Love does not demand that you abandon your needs. Love does not punish you for wanting to be seen. That's not love. That's survival. That's fear masquerading as connection. And yet, you keep holding on. Why? Because walking away feels like betrayal. Because setting the burden down feels like failure. Because some part of you still believes in the myth that if you love them enough, you can heal what was never yours to fix. But let me tell you this. Healing was never your job. You cannot outlove someone's trauma. You cannot outperform their fear. You cannot contort yourself small enough to make them feel safe. That isn't how love works. That isn't how wounds heal. And here's the hardest truth of all. As long as you keep blaming yourself, you let them avoid the mirror. Because if it's your fault, they never have to face theirs. If you are the problem, they get to remain innocent. If you carry the guilt, they never have to carry responsibility. This is why the cycle never ends. But the moment you see it clearly, the illusion shatters. You realize the shelves were always full. You realize you were never lacking. You realize the theft was never about you. And in that moment, you take back what was stolen. Your power, your clarity, your worth. Because the truth is, you were never the broken one. You were simply caught in the storm of someone else's wound. And storms are meant to pass. They are not meant to be your home. The emotional theft, how avoidance drain without giving back. Loving an avoidant is like pouring water into a cracked vessel. No matter how much you give, no matter how steady your hand, the container cannot hold it. And yet, you keep pouring. Because in your heart, you believe that one day, the cracks will seal. That one day, your love will finally be enough to keep them full. But here's the truth. Avoidants are experts at emotional theft. Not because they are cruel, not because they enjoy watching you suffer, but because fear rules them more than love does. Fear of intimacy, fear of vulnerability, fear of needing anyone at all. So what happens? They take your love, but they do not return it. They absorb your care, but they cannot reciprocate. They lean on your stability, but they disappear when you need theirs. And slowly, you become the silent donor, bleeding out your energy, your attention, your tenderness, until you are hollow. It begins in small ways. You listen to their struggles. You comfort them in silence. You excuse their distance. You justify their shutdowns. You tell yourself, they just need patience. They just need space. They just need understanding. But while you're busy carrying them, who is carrying you? The truth is chilling. No one. Because an avoidant does not step in. When your heart is heavy, they withdraw. They vanish. They leave you holding not only your own pain, but theirs as well. And this is where the theft becomes complete. Your love goes out, but nothing returns. Your effort goes in, but the cycle never closes. You become the generator of the relationship, while they become the passive consumer. Think about it. When was the last time you felt genuinely held by them? Not just in body, but in soul. When was the last time they looked at you with the kind of presence that says, I see you, I choose you, I'm here? Chances are, you can't remember, or maybe it was so rare that you cling to that one memory, like proof that everything can change. But one spark does not make a fire, and one moment of warmth does not erase years of coldness. This is the emotional theft of avoidance. They consume your energy, your hope, your light, and in return, they offer absence. They offer silence. They offer distance. They offer excuses dressed up as boundaries. And yet, you remain. Why? Because love blinds us. Because hope tricks us. Because when you have given so much, it feels impossible to walk away empty-handed. You tell yourself, if I just give a little more, maybe they'll finally soften. If I just wait a little longer, maybe they'll finally open up. But here's the reality. They don't open up, because opening up feels like drowning to them. They don't soften, because closeness feels like a threat. It's not you, it's them. They are not rejecting your love. They are rejecting love itself. Because love means need. Love means vulnerability. Love means letting go of control. And to the avoidant, that feels like death. So instead, they keep taking. Not maliciously, not with intent to harm, but because their wound leaves them no other script. They know how to survive, not how to connect. They know how to shut down, not how to lean in. They know how to push away, not how to hold close. And you become the casualty of that wound. You become the one who keeps pouring, who keeps giving, who keeps hoping, until you're standing in the ruins of yourself, wondering where all your love went. Here's the hardest truth of all. They may never change, because change requires facing the wound, and avoidance means running from it. So if you wait for them to return what they take, you may be waiting a lifetime. And in the meantime, your heart grows weary, your spirit grows dim, your body carries stress. It was never meant to hold. This is why loving an avoidant feels like theft, not because they're evil, but because the imbalance steals from you. It steals your joy. It steals your clarity. It steals the simple truth that love is supposed to flow both ways. Love is not meant to drain. It is meant to replenish. Love is not meant to silence. It is meant to amplify. Love is not meant to feel like labor. It is meant to feel like rest. So ask yourself, are you in love or are you in loss? Because when the giving is endless and the return is empty, you are not in love. You are in theft disguised as love. And the cost? Your sense of self, your inner light, your belief that you are worthy of more. But here's what you need to remember. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are not the reason the vessel leaks. You were simply pouring into someone who has no capacity to hold. And that's not your fault. It never was. The shelves were full. The goods were plenty. The store was rich with abundance. But the thief could never see it. Because the problem was never the store. It was always the compulsion. And in love, the problem was never you. It was always their fear. You don't have to keep giving to prove yourself. You don't have to keep pouring to feel worthy. You don't have to keep losing yourself to keep them. Because the truth is, real love doesn't take everything you have. It meets you where you are. It holds you when you're tired. It gives back what you give. And anything less is not love. It's theft. The weight of blame. Why you keep thinking it's your fault. There's a cruel trick that happens. When you love an avoidant, you start to believe the problem is you. Not because you're flawed. Not because you're unworthy. But because their silence, their withdrawal, their absence, it all leaves space. And in that silence, your mind writes stories. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm too needy. Maybe if I were calmer, prettier, smarter, more patient, they would stay. This is how avoidance shifts the weight. They don't even have to say it outright. Their behavior implies it. Their distance suggests it. Their detachment whispers it. And you, because you care so deeply, you take the blame. You bend yourself into shapes you were never meant to hold. You clip your own wings, so they won't feel caged. You silence your needs, so they won't feel overwhelmed. And yet, no matter how much you shrink, they still pull away. That's when the spiral deepens. Because if even your sacrifice doesn't work, then surely the fault must be yours. This is the invisible weight you carry. The weight of believing that their wound is your responsibility to heal. It's the same as living with a kleptomaniac. The shelves are stripped bare. The goods are gone. And somehow, you're the one who feels guilty. You wonder if you should have locked the doors tighter. If you should have hidden things away. If you should have been more vigilant. But stop for a moment. Listen closely. The theft is not your failure. The compulsion is not your fault. It was never about what you lacked. It was always about what they feared. Avoidants fear engulfment. They fear being consumed. They fear needing someone so deeply that they could be abandoned. So they abandon first. They create distance. They rob you of intimacy before it can rob them of control. And yet, because you love them, You interpret their fear as your failure. It's a cruel cycle. Their withdrawal wounds you. Your wound makes you question yourself. Your self-doubt makes you give more. Your giving overwhelms them further. And so they withdraw again. Round and round it spins, until you're dizzy with self-blame. But here's the truth. You must carve into your heart. It is not your job to manage their fear. It is not your fault that they run. It is not your weakness that makes them withdraw. They withdraw because that's what avoidants do. They pull back because closeness feels like fire. They retreat because intimacy exposes their scars. It is not you. It is them. But you know why it hurts so deeply? Because self-blame is easier to hold than the grief of facing reality. If the problem is you, then maybe you can fix it. Maybe you can love harder. Maybe you can try longer. Maybe you can change enough to make them stay. But if the problem is them, if it's their wound, their fear, their refusal to face what terrifies them, then you are powerless. And powerlessness is devastating. So you cling to blame because it gives you the illusion of control. If it's me, I can fix it. If it's them, I have to let go. And letting go is the one thing your heart doesn't want to do. So you stay, you try, you hope, you bleed, you sacrifice, until one day you look in the mirror and realize the person staring back is a shadow of the one who began. The sparkle in your eyes is dimmer. The joy in your laughter is quieter. The weight in your chest is heavier because you've been carrying their wound as if it were your own. But you cannot heal what you did not break. You cannot mend a heart that refuses to open. You cannot fix someone who does not believe they are broken. And yet, you are the one unraveling. So ask yourself, how long will you carry their burden? How long will you wear the blame that was never yours to hold? How long will you silence your needs in the name of their comfort? You deserve a love that does not make you question your worth. You deserve a love that does not leave you in silence. You deserve a love that does not feel like labor. The weight you carry, the endless self-questioning, the constant second-guessing, the quiet ache of never being enough, was never yours to begin with. It belongs to them, to their fear, to their wound, to their unfinished story. So lay it down, set it free, step back and remember, you are not the cause of their avoidance. You are the one who stayed despite it. And that makes you worthy. That makes you strong. That makes you radiant. You have been carrying the wrong weight. It's time to return it. Because the problem was never you. It was always them, walking away from what was never yours to carry. There comes a moment in every story like this where you finally understand. It doesn't always happen with fireworks. It doesn't always happen with shouting, or slammed doors, or grand goodbyes. Sometimes it happens quietly. You wake up one morning, you stare at the ceiling, and you realize you feel heavier than you've ever felt before. Not because of what you've done wrong, but because of what you've been carrying. The avoidance silence, the avoidance distance, the avoidance unfinished conversations, the avoidance fears, the avoidance shadows. You've been holding it all, like a backpack full of stones, slung across your shoulders. You've been walking for miles, telling yourself, this is just what love feels like. But now, finally, you see it for what it is. It isn't love. It's labor. It's exhaustion disguised as devotion. It's blame disguised as responsibility. It's abandonment disguised as independence. And you've been mistaking their wound for your worth. But the truth has been whispering all along. It is not your job to fix them. It is not your role to heal what you didn't break. It is not your burden to carry their fear. You see, avoidance is a fortress. And no matter how soft your voice, how warm your hands, how patient your heart, you cannot open a door that was never yours to unlock. They must open it. They must choose it. They must face the fire of their own fear. And if they won't, you must face your own truth. You cannot live a life where your worth depends on their healing. You cannot live a love where your joy is chained to their wound. You cannot stay small forever, just so they can stay comfortable. So what do? You set the weight down. You take off the backpack, and you lay it on the ground. And for the first time in years, you stand up straight. You breathe without heaviness. You feel your chest expand with air that belongs only to you. You realize the world doesn't end when you stop carrying them. In fact, it begins. You begin. Your laughter begins to return. Your sparkle begins to return. Your freedom begins to return. Because love, true love, was never meant to feel like carrying stones. It was meant to feel like running barefoot in the grass, like leaning into arms that don't flinch, like speaking without fear of silence. It was meant to feel like home. And if what you've known has never felt like home, then maybe it was never love. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was hope dressed as sacrifice. Maybe it was your heart trying to heal theirs, while losing pieces of itself in the process. But no more. Because today, you understand the deepest truth. The problem isn't you. It was never you. It was always them. Their fear, their withdrawal, their refusal to look in the mirror. And now, finally, you give yourself permission to stop holding what isn't yours. You let them keep their fortress. You let them keep their silence. You let them keep their unfinished conversations. And you walk away lighter. Because freedom doesn't come from fixing what isn't yours. Freedom comes from choosing yourself over their shadows. So here's the invitation. Stop carrying the weight that doesn't belong to you. Stop blaming yourself for what they cannot face. Stop mistaking their avoidance for your inadequacy. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not unworthy. You are simply someone who loved deeply and finally realized that love should not feel like labor. So take a breath, stand tall, and remember, the problem isn't you, it's them. And now, it's no longer yours to carry. If this spoke to you, let it be your reminder. You don't have to carry anyone else's burden anymore. Your only job is to choose yourself again and again until the weight is gone and freedom feels like home. Share this video with someone who needs to hear. It was never your fault. Subscribe if you're ready to stop carrying what was never yours.